Storage Spaces Direct step by step. In this tutorial, we are going to cover how to install Storage Spaces Direct using VirtualBox. Before we go ahead, let's have a brief introduction to Storage Spaces Direct. Storage Spaces Direct is a virtual SAN solution that was introduced in Windows 2016 Data Center Edition. It's highly available, highly scalable, software-defined storage that utilizes local disks from different machines and different nodes and creates mirroring between them. It provides a cheaper solution. It does not require any additional hardware, and there is no additional license cost to use this feature in Windows 2016 and future versions. It allows installing SQL Server on Windows cluster in Azure environment. Since in Azure environment we have lack of shared storage, installing cluster is a nightmare. Either you have to use a third-party tool or you can try Storage Spaces Direct for your purpose. So it provides the large, persistent, real-time read and write cache. Caching is configured automatically, and caching is the main feature that makes Storage Spaces Direct more robust and more fault-tolerant. You can also choose a hybrid set of disks that can be utilized in the combination of STD, SSD, or NVMe. If you're using a combination of them, it will pick the fastest one for caching purpose. For example, if you're using 2 STD and 1 SSD, in this case it will use SSD for caching purpose. So caching part is configured automatically, so we don't have to bother about that. Below is the reference about Storage Spaces Direct from the Microsoft. So here you can get the latest details about Storage Spaces Direct. For this demo, I'm going to use 2 virtual machines that I'll be creating using VirtualBox. I'll be installing cluster, enable Storage Spaces Direct, create volumes, and installing SQL Server 2016 on those machines. So for example, this is the model I have created. This is not from Microsoft. I am just showing you how this demo will work. So for this demo, I'll be using 2 virtual machines, and each virtual machine will have its own storage of 10 gigs of size, and 3 disks will be attached on one VM, 3 disks will be attached on another VM, and we'll be creating 3 volumes, data, log, and temp, and then we'll install SQL Server that will utilize these disks. For this demo, I'm using a domain controller that is already set and installed with default settings. The domain controller and DNS are there on the same server, so we'll be using abc.com as a domain controller. I'm not covering this part for this demonstration. Before we go ahead, we have to do some consideration. The first consideration is that you have to use Windows 2016-2019 Data Center Edition. Any other previous version, it will not work. The disk attached to VM must be SSD, HDD, or NVMe. So this is not going to support VHDX file. So if you're going to use VHDX file or VHD file, it will not accept that. The next consideration is that you have to use minimum of 3 disks. If you're using 2 disks, it will not work, and you can have 3 or more than 3 disks for your purpose. Each disk should have minimum of 10 gigs, so if you set 5 gigs or lesser than 10 gigs, it will not work. So for this demonstration, I'll be using one of the virtual machine that is acting as a domain controller and a DNS as well. So this is already installed with abc.com. So let's start this. Next, we'll start with installing the nodes. The first one I name it as WM node 98, and the other one will be 99, and the rest all settings will go as default. And the next we set it to Windows 2016 64-bit, and location is fine. We set it to around 4 gigs, 4096 MB, and move ahead with the next. So it will create a hard disk drive for the OS, so dynamically allocated, and so not a problem. Now we can use this one and set it to 30 gigs. So just create it. Create. So now the next part is to change. So this is the first VM. We'll go to settings again, and we go to change some system settings. We go to system and change the processor to use around 4 processors. And along with this, we have to set the acceleration to Hyper-V. So this is the most important part, and you need to set it before you use this feature. And so the processor is okay. The next we go to the storage part, and the one which you see is the OS disk. So we have to add 3 more. Let's go ahead with adding a create new disk, and this one we can name it as a W1N1 W1N1, or we can name it as N1D1 node 1 disk 1. We set it to 11 gigs, 11,000, and then we set to fixed size, and then it should be 11,000. Okay, so now it allows fixed size, it allows to create. Go to next. Similarly, we add another disk with the same settings. $11,000 MB, and set it to fixed size. So it has been created. Next, the third one. This one becomes N1D3, and this one also set to 11 gigs. Another aspect is so that you can see the size, and another aspect is that you have to set solid state drive. So before we go ahead, we have to just set the solid state drive. So we can set like this, press OK. So now 3 disks are set with SSD, and instead of HD, now it will consider them as SSD. Press OK. Now next go ahead with the next node, so that will be WM node 99. I'll fast forward a little bit because we are going to repeat the same steps. Now again we set it to 4 Hyper-V, and then we go to storage, N2D1 11 gigs, fixed size, SSD, so I think everything is done. Okay, the next is to just set the cd-rom. So everything looks fine, especially this Hyper-V. Hyper-V must be enabled on both the VMs to be able to use. And the next part is that we set the cd-rom to Windows 16. So let's go ahead. So this one, I think this is the unusual name, but this is Windows 2016. And the next is to enable on the next node. Press OK. So let's spin those VMs. So we just start them. We'll keep them side by side, and since we have to copy most of the things, so it will be easier. So the next part is that. So the next part, we just set it next, install now. Same for the next VM as well. So now we have to set it to data center. So make sure don't select standard. Go ahead with the data center's desktop experience. The same is for the next VMs. We set next. We have to accept the license terms. Set next. And here we have to choose the disk which will be used for operating system, 30 gigs, next. And the same applies to the other one. This part will take a longer time to finish, so I'll pause the video and we'll continue after the installation has been completed. So now everything is installed after some time. So the first part is to change the network setting. Go to adapter and we have to set the IP address for both the VMs, and we have to also set the DNS server address. So just set it to 10.80. Let's set it to 99 and set the DNS mask. Oops. Okay, so the next is to set the DNS server name, that is your AD IP address as well. Press OK. And the same step we have to repeat on the next virtual machine. Again, adapter, properties, IPv4. And this one will set it as 98. Now set the 7th mask. And here we set the IP address of the Active Directory. Press OK, close. Now both the VMs has been installed, and the next is to check if IP address is already applied. ipconfig, which is fine. This is 99. And the next one, okay, our next one we have to go with cmd and then ipconfig. So both the VMs are set with IP address. Next part is that we have to add both the VMs to the Active Directory. To do that, we can go to this computer, my computer properties. In fact, just right click properties, remote computer. So remoting we have to enable. Press OK. We apply this and then we go to computer name, and then we have change button. We set it to the WM node 98 and set the domain as abc.com. And this is the AD administrator password we have to put. So welcome to abc.com domain. So press OK. The same we have to apply on the next VM as well. So here we go to properties and go to remote setting. If not set, it's already set. We change. Go to the domain name abc.com. And set the name as WM node 99. Press OK, and now it will add the server to the Active Directory. We need to enter the password. Administrator. So for this demo purpose, I'm using the same account everywhere. Welcome to abc.com domain, and now we have to reboot the machine. So the next part is to disable the firewall, because the firewall is the problem in some cases. So we'll just disable firewall for this demo purpose so that it doesn't fail anything. Let's go ahead with the firewall. We can search it from here. So we can set the firewall. Okay. And on the left pane, once it opens, you can see on and off. So let's switch off all the firewall features for the public network, private network. this approach is not recommended for the production environments. Since we are doing in the labs, we are going to this approach. Let's search for firewall. These are the same steps. Turn off and then press OK. So now both the VMs has been set and there's no issue with the firewall. So we'll just close it and minimize this, and from our domain controller we can try to connect these VMs. So first thing is to enable Hyper-V feature separately, because that step needs to be executed. So we'll be running PowerShell IC on both the VMs to work on this. So this feature has to be enabled separately on both the VMs. So let's run it as administrator with no restart option. In the meantime, I can go ahead on the next VM as well. So we can go ahead with that feature. So it's already running. So now it has been enabled on both the VMs. So for this one it has enabled. We'll check the other VM as well. Since we have set no restart, that is not required, but once we enable all the features we can go ahead with the restart. The next is to install a bunch of features that we have. So let's go ahead with the first VM. Let's enable this feature, and this has to be executed on both the VMs. So we go to the first one and then run it. Since there are so many features, it might take some time to complete. Now it is already done after a pause. So now failover-clustering, data center bridging, these features has been enabled. The next is that we can check the storage, that how many storage are there and what is the availability of the disk that can be pooled or not. So we just run it. It will take a little time. And now we know that 3 disks are there and they are attached to local disk that can be used. We'll run the same script on the other machine. And it takes some time. Now we can see 3 disks can be used that are part of the local disk. So we can see the pooling is possible on these disks. Next part is to validate the cluster. So validation can be done with a test cluster statement. So just one of the feature that we have to add is the cluster administrator option, because that is not enabled by default. So let's go ahead with that. So we click next, and in the features you will find this under the remote administration option. The first one, remote feature administration tools. So here one level down as well. So now this is the feature, the failover cluster management tools. So this is something which we have to enable on both the VMs. So for example, if you run clueadmin.msc, it will fail with the error message. So to avoid that, we can add this feature before we go ahead with the reboot. So since we have enabled the features, it's really mandatory to reboot the server once. We just go ahead and okay, we'll click next and we'll come down to the remote administration options and failover clustering tools, and we just enable it and install. So once the feature has been installed, we'll be rebooting them once before we go ahead with the cluster validation. Okay, so this has completed and a pending reboot is there, so we'll just reboot both the VMs. Okay, here also it's completed. We'll close this, and next we can go ahead with a reboot of the VMs. So to do that, you just come up here, restart, and okay, we have to set it to planned, continue, and the same applies to the next VM. So after reboot, now we are online. So now the next part is to validate the cluster. Just let's run this commandlet, and we can try it, how it works and what is the report about that. So these are the two VMs that we have included already, and so we don't have to run on both the machines. It can be run on one machine only. Let's go ahead with this. So it might take some time. It will generate a report, and we'll check if that report comes okay. So in the meantime, what we can do, we can check if cluster administrator is configured correctly. So currently nothing is there on the cluster end, but we can see if glue admin is working. So okay, in the meantime the test has got completed, so you can see the HTML file. So just copy this and we just go ahead with the Internet Explorer. Okay, you can maximize this and then we can paste it. So the report looks quite clean, most of the success, there's no error messages there. The most important ones is that you can see storage spaces direct feature. So here we can see 3 disks are there, 4th one is operating system, and those 3 VMs can support those 3 disks can support the pooling option, so which is good sign. So we are on track, everything looks on. The next part is to run the cluster. So we have to create a cluster. So I'll use the name wm-clustest, and these are the machines which we'll be using, and I set the IP address as 101, so because that is not already in use, so we can start it. So let's start it. This command has to be run on one of the VM, not required to be run on both the VMs. So cluster has been built. We can go ahead and check with the cluster administrator. We can just right click, connect to cluster, and then we can put a dot. So it will connect the local cluster. So this is wm-clustest, and we can see that it has been created with no witness. So we'll add a quorum setting. The top one is the quorum setting, and that we can try to run. And I've used one of the shared location on my domain controller, so we'll use that. Let's go ahead with select the quorum witness, and then we click next. Configure share witness, that is the next part. So just this is done. And here we put the cluster at the main domain controller name. You can put the computer name over there, and you can search it. So we can see the quorum is there, that directory. Okay, so everything looks fine. To just okay this and finish. So now cluster part has been completed, and we can see file share witness also. So everything looks okay. so we can go ahead with enabling this. This is the main command that we have to run. So again we go ahead with the PowerShell ISC. So this is the cluster name. So we create a new statement, enable cluster storage spaces direct, and then CIM session as WM plus test. So just CLS this part and then we run this. Since this has to run on the cluster, you have to run once, and I'll not forward this because this is the important part. So one confirmation was required, so yes to all. Okay, so that was the major command that ran successfully, which means that we are able to test the S2D cluster. That is a great sign. Let's go ahead to the C drive and see how we see this. So we go to C. So this is the cluster storage, the default name that is given. So it will already create and it will be available on both the VMs. So currently we don't have any volume, but we can create some volume to test how volumes look like. So next command is to create a volume. So this is the command that I'll be running on that. So let's create a new and we can run this. I name it as a friendly name as data disk and set it to 5 gigs. So let's run this. So the process is running, creating volume. So now this is the output, which looks okay. Let's go ahead to the disk and see how it appears on the disk side. We can go to the volume. So we can see the volume 1 there, and the size is 5 gigs. The next part is to go to the storage pool and see how it appears there. To do that, go to Run, Server Manager, and then you go ahead with the, it might take some time to complete, so we can go ahead to All Servers, File and Storage Services. Once you click, you can see there are some options, but one of them is the storage pools here. So once you click this, you will come to know what are different storage pools created. So if we have one pool and it shows how much free space is there, and you can see the disk, and you can also see the virtual volumes as well. You can do a right click and you can get the details as well. So for example, this one is layout is mirror and provisioning is the fixed. So now the next part is to create 3 volumes. One will be the log and another one will be the temp. So log disk, and we set it to 5 gigs, which is fine. Let's run it. So now we can see it's coming up. Yeah, so now volume 2 is visible. The next part, we can just rename it to data. Okay, it should be date. Set it to data, and the next volume we can set it to log. So we can just go to rename log. Now we'll check the size and details on the other machine. So here we can go to C cluster storage. Here we can see both of them. That means it is working fine. So we're able to rename and it's getting reflected on the other side. The next part is to we can go to cluster, and here we can see 2 volumes are there. One is 6 GB, other one is also 6 GB, and and the data, you can see the log directory shown here. So the third disk is for temp, so let's go ahead with the temp. Let's give it to temp disk and then run it. Temp is also created. We can go ahead and rename this. Set it to temp. Okay, so all three disks are done. The volumes are okay. So next part is to add some space to existing volume. So to do that, we can go to the storage pool. Let's come up to the storage pool here. Let's do one rescan, and after that we'll come to know what are the disks it shows. So here we can see we have 3 disks and there is a data disk, and suppose if we want to add some more storage and make it some 10 gigs, we can just right click, extend virtual disk, and there we can mention 10 GB. And press OK. So once this part is done, you can easily see it's reflecting here, but on the disk it will not show that. Once you refresh, you will not see any difference. On the other hand, when you go to the cluster, here you can see the data has got 12 gigs, so which is fine. So we can see the cluster pool is there, and inside this cluster pool we have all these 3 volumes: data, log and temp. We can see the user space there. So total 60 GB of capacity is there. So we can go to disk, and here we have 3 disks, 12, 6, 6. So 12, these are the log and temp, another one is the data. So everything is done. We can next go ahead with the SQL Server installation. So now we have CDs mounted. Just let's go ahead with the setup. You can go to installation, and we have new failover cluster installation. Let's click this, and here everything is blank. We don't have any roles created. We can see the node is 98, so we are logged in on 98. We'll be using this as a primary as of now, and for 99 we will be adding that to the node later. So first the installer is coming up. Everything looks fine. Before we go ahead, we have to test the cluster because this is one of the validation part. So let's click this and complete the validation part. So we'll just stop it for some time and complete this part. So just we can give a break, bring it down. It might take some time to complete. Test is running. So now it has completed. Let's copy this report file and let's see what is the output that has come from this. Just copy this and paste in Internet Explorer address bar. Okay, so everything looks normal. There's no problem. There is one warning, otherwise there are a few warnings, but there is no error, so we can go ahead. So this is fine. We are using just a single NIC card, which is fine. This should not create any problem for our installation. So we are all set. Let's go ahead with the installation part. Click next, accept the license terms, and we do our check. The check is running fine, there's no issue. And the next part is to install the failover cluster rules. So currently setup files are getting generated. So now rules are running and we can see only limited warnings, so which is fine. It's not a problem. Let's go ahead next, select the features. To select the feature, we can go ahead with the database engine and set the instance root directory as the data directory which we created just now. So that is C cluster storage. You can pick from here. Go ahead with the C cluster storage and set it to data. Click next. Now we have to set the IP configuration. So before that, this network resource group, so it will create itself, which is fine. This name is also fine, there's no problem. Go next, and okay, so these are the disks. Data disk is already selected. We can select log and temp as well. Let's move ahead to the next step. So these are the names you'll see in NI as well. Just click this and set the IP address. So we'll set it to 10.80.3. And we can set it to something like 201 for this. So that's okay. We'll set the account name to the domain controller name abc/administrator, and we can just do a copy and paste it here and apply the passwords. We're not doing anything for collision, but in the next tab you can try to change that. Let's go ahead next. You set it to mixed mode authentication. We use the same password which are at the current user at the data directory. So this is already selected as data root directory, so we just don't leave it, but for users definitely we can change it. So we can set it to C cluster storage data, and for log we can pick the same log volume, and the backup we can just leave it for now. It's only for demo purpose, so we can leave it, or else we can set it to C data. The text part is to change the temp. We have to change, and we'll just remove this and add the location for the volume we created for the temp. Next. Okay, so everything looks fine. You just open the config file so we can check how things are going. Just notepad and paste the location, how it comes. So the action is install failover cluster, and then we can see these are the values. We can see the instance name here, and also we can see the features and rest all things. The drive letter is fine. C cluster storage is for data log, so we're all fine. We can just save the file for the future purpose. So we just remove this part, and we go to that location and copy this file. So next is we just click the install. The installation can take some time to complete, so I'll pause the video for some time in between so that it can be completed quickly. Next, we can check how it has been installed. We can go to CMD, and there we can test with OSQL-E-S, and that is the server name S2D test. S2D test / S2D_test. So now we can see what is the server name. We can get with server name. So we can see it is correctly set. The next we can check the version, what version has been installed with the add version. So now this is SQL Server 2016, which is fine. So now we can see how we can install on the primary side, and the next part is that we have to go ahead with the installation on secondary. On the data we can see the binaries are there, so which means if you go to data, it will show you the master model. Next is to install on the secondary, so let's go ahead with that part also. And now we have to just add the node to the cluster, and that will be attached to the same cluster name that is installed for SQL Server. So here we just click add node to the SQL Server failover cluster. We just click this, and it might take some time to come up, so I'll pause and then I can start it. So now it has come up. Let's go ahead, next, accept the license terms, and then we can see the checks are fine. Go next, and then it will install some set of files, so let it complete. So all the rules checks are fine. Next, and we have chosen the server name, which is fine. Hyper-V should come automatically, so everything looks okay. Address is 201, which is fine. And we can click next, and here we just go to database engine and we set it to the password. The account name is already given there, so we don't have to enter it again. Click next. Okay, so this will create the config file. We just can copy this config file to just open and see how it appears in Notepad. Let's go ahead and double click to the location where we can see the configuration file, and we have copied it for future reference. So now we have started the installation part on the secondary, and it might take some time to complete. So now everything is already installed. Let's move it to another node. So currently it was running on 98. Let's move it to 99, and it might take some time to go to other node. So everything is online. We can go ahead with the SQL Server, and there we can check where it is running as of now. Let's check with select server property, and we just set computer name, computer name, physical NetBIOS, codes here. So now you can see it's running on 99, so everything has been installed on both the machines correctly, and we are able to failover as well. So we'll create one database for the testing purpose. So let's create database test db, and let's see how files are created and where they are created. So let's go ahead with the, can refresh it. Yeah, so we can see everything runs fine, and there's no issue with the storage pool. So we can see data unlock there. So it is working fine, and the next part is that we can go to the storage location to see MDF files are there or not. Okay, so we can see this way we can say that this installation has completed successfully without any problem. We have 3 volumes, and there's no issue.